What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into DLF. I am your host today, Justin, and we are talking start or sit at the wide receiver position for week 3. Now, before we get in, I'm going to say the same thing I said last week. Yes, right, this is a Dynasty channel. We do Dynasty football. But we got to sprinkle in some start-sit, right? You have to still set your lineups. You still have to play the right guys to make the playoffs, to make the championship, and then to ultimately, right, build a dynasty. You have to play the right players. So that is what we are going to talk about today. Now, we're not talking Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, right? We're not talking the guys that are no-brainers. You start them, you set and forget it, right? We're talking guys that are back-end wide receiver 2s in a good matchup, wide receiver 3s, flexes, guys that are a little bit deeper that you are probably looking at every week and thinking, do I play them? Is this the week they go off? That's what we're trying to figure out. So with all of that said, let's get into it. First player on the list, it is, unfortunately, Darnell Mooney of the Chicago Bears. 28 attempts passing for the Bears in 2 weeks. 1 in a monsoon, right? 17 attempts. That should have been the floor. How could it not be? The Bears trailed 3 scores almost exclusively against the Packers, and they racked up 9 pass attempts when it mattered and 2 basically in the last drive of the game. The passing volume specifically in this Bears offense makes it impossible to start anybody. It makes it impossible to start Justin Fields. It makes it impossible to start Mooney and obviously Cole Kmet, but we're not talking him. He should be on waivers in redraft. You can't play Darnell Mooney. Pick any wide receiver. Pick Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Jahan Dotson, right? All of those guys right now I'm playing over Darnell Mooney. Could this be a get-right game against the Texans? Yeah, it definitely could be, right? They've allowed the second most passing yards or yards to wide receiver this season. So it could be a good spot for Mooney. But even then, the volume, the Bears just don't want to pass. Justin Fields is missing open guys on his limited passes. They're not inclined to pass more. So you're basically thinking he should play well. Game script could be in his favor. But is the volume going to be there? And that's the question. I don't think it is. So I'm leaving him on my bench until I see something, right? I'm fine watching Darnell Mooney score 15 points on my bench. I'm not going to lose sleep over it because he's shown nothing in 2 weeks. So if you sit him and he goes off, I think that's a move you can live with, and that's something I'm comfortable with this week. The next guy on our list here, it is the ex-Bear. It is the new Ram. It is Allen Robinson. Week 1 was bad. It was in prime time. It was terrible. I had a public meltdown on Twitter. Week 2 was much better. Right, he puts up over 15 points. He catches a touchdown. He sees 5 targets. He also has a second touchdown called back on a BS stoppage. I mean, there was the latest injury stoppage I've ever seen. So, really, we could have been looking at Allen Robinson, right, with 6 targets, 2 touchdowns, 20-plus fantasy points, and basically, he's viewed a lot different. But what I've said now, right, 5 targets, potentially as high as 6 if the play doesn't get stopped, that's not enough volume to say lock Allen Robinson in as a must-start top 20 wide receiver, right? That doesn't put him in that territory. He's still touchdown dependent, right? He saw a 14% target share last week, and that's the big uptick that we were hoping for. It's tough, but being that they're playing Arizona, he scored a touchdown last week. His target share went up. I'm going to go back to Allen Robinson, but as a flex play, right? He's not a guy you have to put into your lineup. But if I roster him, I'm most likely playing him because, again, game script should be in his favor, right? This should be fast-paced. It should be a shootout. Some guys I am battling with if I want to play him over. DK Metcalf for 1. I think that's a coin flip. DK's the volume play in an easier matchup against Atlanta. But, again, I like the touchdown upside. I like just the offensive volume Allen Robinson's going to be a part of. So I'll play him over DK Metcalf, but that's very close. And then Adam Thielen, right? He looks a little bit washed up. He's older. We get it. Kirk Cousins was terrible in primetime. Maybe it's just that. But I want Robinson over Thielen. And then Jahan Dotson is the other piece here. The volume has been insane in Washington. I don't know if it happens again this week, at least for all 3 wide receivers. So I'll take Allen Robinson over Jahan Dotson. Our next guy here is Treylon Burks. Now, if you watched him on Monday night, you saw a lot of him, right? 6 targets on 20 passes, good for a 30% target share. And really, right, they benched everybody in the fourth quarter, and it was kind of a joke. What we care about is the target share. 30% is nothing to say, oh, that doesn't matter. That's huge. The issue is, and it always will be with this Tennessee offense, is the overall number of pass attempts, right? A 30% target share on 25 passes is a lot less interesting than, say, a 25% target share on 50 passes, or whatever those numbers are, right? He doesn't get the offensive volume to put up massive target numbers in this offense, and that's going to be an issue. The other issue is he's still not playing a full complement of snaps, right? He played 45% of the snaps. Maybe some of those are lost to the other to the second string offense, but still, he's not playing 100% of snaps. He's not running 100% of routes. He's still a part-time player. And this is exactly what they did with A.J. Brown his rookie year. It took him several weeks to get fully integrated into this offense, and it looks to be the same with Treylon Burks. So with that being said, I'm not going to play him, right? I would love to play Treylon Burks and say, this is the week. This is when it happens. But he's going to be a prove it before I do it type of player, right? Prove that you are a full-time player, that you're capable of getting 8 to 10 targets, and then I will play Treylon Burks. Until then, we're just trying to guess and throw a dart saying, this is the breakout. I want to see it before I trust him. So again, he's behind Darnell Mooney. If you're trying to gauge the 2 sits and you're deciding between those 2, he's behind Darnell Mooney. But again, I don't want to play either. I'm not excited about either of those guys in my lineup this week. Moving on to our next guy on the list. It is Curtis Samuel, obviously of the Washington Commanders, and he's been a revelation this year. He has been phenomenal in 2 starts, and the usage backs up his production, right? He has seen 10-plus opportunities both weeks now. He's received 5 carries, a whole mess of targets, and he's done a lot with it, right? This looks like the Curtis Samuel they thought they were getting when they signed him out of Carolina, and he is delivering. He is fully healthy. He is a key part of the offense. I mean, he's running 91% of routes right now. He's pulling in a 23.5% target share. And again, that's in addition to 5 rushing attempts, right? 2.5 per game. And is that a huge tiebreaker? Does that push him way up your rankings? No, but it's gravy, right? That's the extra bit on top that makes him so enticing. So when you're looking at Curtis Samuel, right, what do you do with him this week against Philly? Well, Philly's really good. Philly's just very, very good. We saw it on Monday night. They kicked the crap out of the Vikings. This week, that means, right, there's a good chance they are playing catch-up or at least playing from behind. And if I got to pick 2 wide receivers from this offense to start, it's still Terry McLaurin. And obviously, it is Curtis Samuel. Jahan Dotson, I mentioned him earlier. He's the guy where if game script doesn't go as intended, probably sees the biggest drop-off in production, and that's why I still want him on the bench. But Curtis Samuel has become a plug-and-play high-end flex option, right? He's not necessarily a top 24 guy because his quarterback is still Carson Wentz. So he's still a very high-end flex, but in Dynasty, that's a borderline must-start player. So Curtis Samuel has become a must-start, right? Again, when you're comparing him to other guys that you could be debating with, him and Allen Robinson, that's a coin flip. And I'm not going to say for sure Curtis Samuel, for sure Allen Robinson. I think both are valid starts. Curtis Samuel is going to be a higher floor because of the volume. Allen Robinson, the ceiling may be a little bit more enticing because the offense is better. So make that decision between those 2. But someone I am for sure playing Curtis Samuel ahead of, Juju Smith-Schuster. We don't know what he's doing. We don't know what that Kansas City offense is in terms of pass catchers outside of Travis Kelce. There's too much ambiguity. So I'm off Juju in terms of versus Curtis Samuel. And then I'll take Curtis Samuel over Brandon Aiyuk, a guy we're actually about to talk about now. So let's get into it. Let's just pivot. It's Brandon Aiyuk is our last player here. And Brandon Aiyuk is not the high-end flex that Curtis Samuel is, but he's still a top 30 wide receiver. And the reasons being, Jimmy G is at quarterback again. And Jimmy G is not great. we know this. It's not news to say Jimmy G is not a superstar quarterback. But what Jimmy G does is raise the pass volume in this offense, right? He now has a full week with the ones again to kind of re-implement that offense we saw last year, the offense that turned Brandon Aiyuk into a top 24 wide receiver over the back half of the season. And a lot of the circumstances are the same, right? Elijah Mitchell is already injured. He's on IR. Kittle is not fully healthy because it's Kittle and he's just never healthy. So naturally, Deebo Samuel is shifting to a role in the backfield. Aiyuk is the clear-cut wide receiver one. I put air quotes around it because he's the de facto one. Deebo's the true one, but his backfield role means Aiyuk should see the most targets, and that is why he's a top 30 wide receiver, right? I mean, even last week, 8 targets, a 33% target share. That is the type of volume I think you see for Brandon Aiyuk moving forward. So that alone pushes him into my top 30. And then when you factor in your matchup, right, he's playing Denver. Patrick Surtain is dealing with a shoulder injury. Justin Simmons on the back end is on IR already. It's a banged-up secondary. Aiyuk should have or could have a big game here with wide receiver 2 upside. So when we're looking at guys he's going to be behind and ahead of in week 3, I'm playing Samuel. I'm playing Allen Robinson over Aiyuk. But I'm still playing Brandon Aiyuk over like the likes of Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Allen Lazard, Elijah Moore, those type of guys. I think Aiyuk is in a better position to outperform them this week in the matchup with the current state of the 49ers. All right, guys, that is all I have for you. As always, thank you for watching. Again, if you like what we're doing here, questions, comments, drop that stuff down below. Subscribe, do all the YouTube things. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.